Hey, how you doing, everybody? Andrew Scott, and of course, this is gonna be Keep Your Hat On. Quick apology, I am completely underwater with a ton of different things. So we inadvertently took November off, and this is the episode that we recorded back at the beginning of November, and it's going to be very edit light because, I got no time. But we will try to get another episode recorded here in the next week and get it out to you before the end of the year. But if you don't hear from us, have a wonderful holiday of your choosing. And we will talk to you in 2024, if not sooner. Talk to you later. Bye. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests as individuals and do not necessarily reflect those of advertisers or sponsors. This show is intended as entertainment and commentary only. The producers strive for verisimilitude, but nothing said on this podcast should be taken as fact by the listener or viewer without performing due diligence. While generally considered safe for work by way of content, some language may be considered offensive by more sensitive viewers or listeners.
Existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
This is Keep Your Hat On, a show by three nerdy nobodies and one nerdy kinda somebody about nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is brought to you by the Narrowband Broadcast Network. NBBN, the focus is on you. By Andrew Scott Media, making your media matter. And by the kind support of our friends all around the world via Patreon. Patreon, create on your own terms. Coming up on this episode, it's, I don't know. I've been gone for a while. Plus, you guys never really kind of keep me up to date on what I'm supposed to be saying. Where's my script? What's my motivation? Gosh, people, can't we get together on this? Well, anyways, let's get whatever the hell this is started. Here's your hosts, Andrew, Robert, Dr. Mark, and, well, it's hard to not love him. It's Chris. The same thing I think that happened.
And this is how we're going to come into the show, with our hands up. Yeah. Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so everybody got somebody or something that they want to address by way of this art question?
So we're saying trust the podcast, not the podcaster, Andy? Is that?
I think actually, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
It should go in the merch. We'll put that in the merch.
Yeah, that's not bad.
What was the other one that Heather and I came up with today that was really good, and I can't quite remember what? We were talking. I was talking in my Discord server today with a number of my people, and we were talking about neurodivergent behavior because a lot of us are either spectrum people or are ADHD. And I recounted a story where long ago, about 12 or 13 years ago, when I was first diagnosed, one of my therapists, who was not really very versed in adult ADHD, tried to get me to work with that whole memory palace thing.
Oh, the memory, like a house in which you put rooms and things.
Exactly. If you remember, it got really popularized with Sherlock, with Benny Ben Cucumber Patch, and there were a couple episodes where he did the memory palace thing. And I said, I was introduced to that back in the 80s. In middle school, when the talented and gifted teacher, which of course TAG was essentially where all us kids like me got dumped because they didn't know what the fuck to do with us. But they tried to do that, right? Yeah. And I was just like, it didn't work at all for me. And my therapist at the time went, "Why do you think that is?" And I was just like, well, think about doing that, but having it be in Howl's Moving Castle.
My favorite, by the way, after Totoro.
Oh,
saying,
yeah, right. Actually, not my second favorite. My favorite, of course, is still Totoro. My second favorite actually is Spirited
Oh,
Away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just
There's a new one. There's a new one on the horizon.
right. And speaking of new, did you guys catch that we've got a new Gojira? We've got a new take on Godzilla.
Dude, it is badass looking. It's here December 1st in the United States.
Yeah, and
We are all over that.
I read the breakdown of it. And one of the things that's really interesting, and I'll point you to this, Mark, is that really the director, whose name escapes me, is really going at this as a return to the spiritual core of Gojira movies, and the fear and the manifestation of nuclear panic in in all the Kaiju stuff. And so it was a really I'm totally about it. And by the way, apparently we started the show. Hello and welcome back to Keep Your Hat On. Everybody's hands up. We're not touching anything because we had problems, but I am Andrew Scott, of course, along with my good friends Ty, Robert, Anthony, and Christopher Vicano, and Dr. Mark C.E. Peterson. And I see my record button there. The record thing is there. Okay, we're good.
And you don't touch anything.
Right?
Don't touch anything.
I can touch that, and I can be that
out.
guy.
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Right, exactly.
Squeezing your head. Squeezing your head.
Oh my God, we are in a mood today,
Yes,
aren't
we
we?
are. Well, Dr. Mark was threatening me with his mood on the way in here, so we'll just see how this all goes.
So the new Godzilla movie,
God.
two things. One, I am really, really happy that it's coming back to its origin, where Godzilla is not friendly to the humans. He's kind of a little bit peeved. And two, the only disappointment that I'm really going to have, and I hope that it's not there. Don't get me wrong. I love me some BOC, but it's overdone. It does not need to be in the movie.
Yeah, it's become like so commonplace, and it's sort of I agree. It's
similar to when they come out with a new Viking movie and they use immigrant song, right?
Whenever they can, as long as the boys allow.
And I mean Thor.
Oh,
Thor
Blue Oyster Cult version of Godzilla.
Godzilla.
For God's sake.
On the subject of Godzilla, I've got a little parenthetical here, which is the director of Godzilla 2014 just released a movie. It came out like at the end of September, and it's maybe in the second run theaters now, called The Creator. And it is
I remember you went and saw it, didn't you?
Best, most thoughtful, most gripping sci-fi movies I have seen in a long
taken under
time.
advisement.
I mean, it is brilliant. It pulls together. I mean, there are definitely some callbacks and some references, some inspiration taken from like Blade Runner and District 7, but it really tells its own story.
This thing got
and it is beautiful. I mean, it is just this wonderful.
It goes to show you that
will rip your heart out.
Yeah, don't listen to anybody else's reviews of movies.
I know, right?
I think the whole movie review world, since Siskel and Ebert passed away, bless them both, I could give a shit about what any supposed movie experts' view of things are.
The critical press, the mainstream critical press, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the studios at this point. All they are is carrying PR water for the studios, and it's bullshit.
Yeah, and that makes us sound very conspiratorial and, oh, yeah, man, it's the corporations, man. But honest to God, I don't think I've seen a legitimately good movie review in 10 years. I mean, I don't trust them anymore. They shit-canned Blade Runner 2049, which was
right.
I kind of like it too.
Fucking brilliant.
Yeah. And I think that we've moved away from a true criticality of movies and how they're impact the zeitgeist of the
We want to say
culture.
it died with Roger Ebert. I think that's what you want to say.
I swear to
Might have
God it
done
did.
that.
And I
Yeah,
know
I
that
think it
sounds
did.
really pandering, but Ebert was one of the last movie reviewers that I think was able to have a foot in both worlds. He was able to have a foot in the academic study of film, but he wrote for really cheesy Harvey Korman kind of.
He wrote
So he's
Super Vixens, didn't he?
yeah,
No,
Yeah,
right.
Beyond Valley of the
Beyond Valley of the
Dolls.
Dolls. That's
So
what it was.
yes, so he really does have. He had a foot in this world of, well, look, was it fun? Was it entertaining? Not everything needs to be, this deep existential study.
We'll
Was it
wander
fun?
into
Did you
this one of
like
these
it?
days. Well, I'm not going to ever teach it again. Oh my God. So, I know it's just
Oh,
hilarious. So, one of my colleague and I, Chris Yogerst, who was like, God, this Chris man, he's going great guns now. He just had like lunch and was on a panel with David Zucker of Airplane fame, who's back in Milwaukee,
right?
saying hi to everybody and talking about the movie, which was like 50 years ago
Oh,
or
shut
something.
up. Oh my
Horrifying. Anyway,
God.
Chris and I did this class together, and it was going the cheat was going to be about aesthetics and film. And I spent years looking at the aesthetic literature and philosophy, and it's just awful. I mean, like in the worst ways imaginable. And so we just made stuff up. But one of the things I came up with is I came up with 4 diagnostic frames for looking at the movies. And one of them is, did you like it? And seriously, because it's like there's movies that have a function, right? So like some of these movies are not designed to be Bergman, right? And in fact,
No.
there's Bergman films that I'll just never watch again. Wild Strawberries. I'm just never gonna Virgin Spring ever watch them again because
And some movies aren't even meant to be Birdman, which I thought was a
yes.
great movie.
Birdman was
another
awesome.
brilliant movie that got shredded. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris, it's interesting that you bring up that movie and that director, because to get back to Gojira, the new Godzilla movie, the director of that movie loved the 2014 Godzilla and actually said, I actually used that as a touchstone to build out my approach to this. Like Ty, you said, like, Gojira is not friendly, not here to help us, not here to
Yeah.
save us.
Not our buddy. Yeah.
No, it is an antagonistic kind of, and the thing about Godzilla was meant to be a gray area. Godzilla was the
like
and I was going to
like the
accidentally
karmic
say
response, or something to
Well,
and it was the
Godzilla
combination.
was
It was the
Godzilla
combination of the Earth coming
there.
back to take
Yeah.
care of itself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that means that there is part of it that is man-made and there is part of it that is God-made. And
Yeah,
in between the gray is where Godzilla comes from.
well, the
Well, and
original,
we were-
yeah, I mean the original function of Godzilla was as Mother Nature's enforcer. I mean, and that's why I like the 2014 movie, is because he wasn't chummy with the humans. Humans were incidental.
utterly irrelevant
Yeah,
to him.
they were. Yeah, totally inconsequential to
Go
the
ahead,
grand
Ty. I'm
scheme of
sorry.
things.
Oh no,
I
I you know what I was going to say was it is part karmic. I think it originally, and has its going back to its original form, was about the fears of nuclear.
Of course.
Yeah, that's where it first
the
came
nuclear
from.
tests, and it was born out of that fear. And you're right, Mark. It's totally karmic. What happened in the first movie is you screw around with nature, and guess what?
Nature bats last.
And
see what happens,
back.
Larry?
Yeah.
and for me, not to get too deep with it, but I've often found it very interesting, some of the, because you guys had all mentioned karmic. I've always felt that there was a lot more Shinto in Godzilla.
Yeah, kind of more
Exactly, the
animistic.
ancestors always, every single life, all the way back to the primordial.
Well, that totally makes sense because, especially at the time, the first movie,
Well, yeah.
Shinto was the prevailing.
Well, yeah, because we were just coming out of World War II, and Buddhism was actually very frowned upon because it was not the state religion of the
Right.
empire. But I tell you what, this is leading in nicely to the discussion that we're going to have today when we come back, and that is sometimes art makes you uncomfortable. And I've been kind of having some interesting feelings
Oh.
lately, not only about art making me uncomfortable, but the artist. And so when we come back, we're going to have a bit of a four-way Donnybrook about this. But this is the Narrowband Broadcast Network. I'm Andy. That's Dr. Mark. That's Chris. That's Ty. We're the Hats. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Bye. Blocks. In 3, 2. And we're back on Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell even we don't know where we're going to go. I'm Andrew Scott, of course, along with Dr. Mark C.E. Peterson and Chris Vacano and Ty Robert Anthony. And Chris, you said that
Andy,
you had a thing that you need from me.
I got this thing on my mind. So since the last episode, I have had Pump Up the Volume stuck in my head, and I can't find my blackjack gum anywhere. Have you got a spare stick?
Oh, I've got your blackjack gum. You left it here last time.
Oh,
So,
no wonder.
here.
Could you pass
Does
me
this eat
one?
up a lot of bandwidth?
There you go.
Are we?
Oh, hey,
No, it
thank you.
just eats up a lot of licorice. That's
that
all.
worked
Yeah.
out really well.
So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Huh.
There you go. By
Thanks
the
a
way,
lot, man.
you're an absolute asshole, Chris, because that is my favorite gum, and they do not make a truly sugar-free version of it, and I cannot pass. So
I am so sorry.
when next you are here, please take all your gum that I can't have.
Take the temptation away. I got you.
That's okay. I got my brand. I got my brand that I can use here. If Extra wants to sponsor the show, call me, okay? So
Man, at least with the extra, the flavor lasts. I mean,
and they're going to get on
flavor
that.
is already off
Ty
of
and
my
I will be
gum.
here when you guys get stuff.
right, I'm done with the gum thing.
All right. Yeah. Hey guys.
So one of the things that actually, Ty, I sent this to you the other day, was there's a new documentary that is coming out, or if it's not coming out, it's already out. And
I
it's
think it's
called-
out the 12th.
Yeah, something like that. It's called Immediate Family. And on a number of our episodes in the past, we discussed that whole cohort of music that happened in the early to mid 70s in and down and around LA and Santa Barbara, that area. The most famous club at that time in that area, in that cohort, was the Troubadour.
Okay.
And then of course, the Stone
You guys are
Pony
back in
and
my
things
era
like that.
here, really.
Well,
I worked at the Troubadour.
Did you
Front
work at the
door.
Trou?
What?
I did
Nice.
a number of shows at the Troubadour. Yes.
Oh, so okay, you worked like I worked, where we weren't residents there, we were local crew. That, yeah. And in that, Mark, you're right. It's your generation when you were able to go to the club. It's our generation in that this is what our brother and sisters' record collections
Yeah, I
were
bet.
that we
Yeah,
inherited, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, people like Linda Ronstadt and Jackson Brown
man.
and, that whole era were
JT.
supported. Exactly. Were supported in much the same way as the Beatles, or excuse me, the Beach Boys were supported by the Wrecking
Oh,
Crew. The
hell
Wrecking
yes.
Crew was the session group for that era of
It's
music.
insane.
Well, and
The
speaking
music-
of documentaries, if you haven't seen the documentary on the Wrecking
yeah.
Crew,
I
check
did
it
not
out.
know. I had
That's-
never
yeah,
known that Glenn Campbell was in that bunch. And it's like
Oh
that
yeah.
suddenly explained,
Yeah.
like, when because in the old when he I mean, I
Like
was a big
so
fan
many
of his
things.
TV show
Yeah.
back then, but
Oh yeah,
and
it was a great
he was
show.
people think of him as like just this country singer, but
He's not a humstrumming
once in a
singer.
while he would
No.
unload and shred, and you just sit there. There's a famous thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
still on YouTube somewhere where Ray Clark came by one day, and the two of
Yeah.
them, and it was like,
Yeah. Lit the place on fire.
So this is the mind blower that I've
oh,
been.
go.
We were talking about documentaries. I did not know this. Holy cow. Mark, you probably
Yeah.
knew this. Andy, you may know this. I was watching a documentary on McLean and American Pie,
yeah.
which, holy cow, that was the first song at 3 years old that I could complete and sing along with.
I totally understand why. It appeals to certain brains, right?
And
Yeah.
and that album cover. I must have stared at that album cover for hours.
Yeah.
But going into the song, of course, it is about the tragic accident that takes Buddy Holly,
Holly.
And the Big Bopper and
Bopper.
Richie Valens. Yeah.
And Richie Valens,
Um, What I didn't realize was Waylon Jennings was the guitarist for Buddy
Yeah,
Holly.
he was supposed to be on the
Yep.
plane.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and apparently they had words.
Mm-hmm.
They had like serious words
Oh, I
before
didn't
he
know
got
that.
on the plane.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
And
thinking
you know,
about it,
that
but-
whole thing, I mean, we live in this privileged age now of the interwebs and all these people doing these deep dive things. And now we are discovering, we're learning all this back history that used to be pretty deep, dark, nerdtastic musical
Yeah.
knowledge, you know?
Well, and they mentioned it just really quick in passing, but then
Right.
I had to do some research, and I was like, "Holy cow, that's Waylon Jennings has a child with
Right.
no facial hair,
Yep.
no long hair. What the hell?" And he's playing for Buddy
Yeah.
Holly.
Well, and so many people don't know like other musical arcana, like the fact, you know, just how incredible a prolific writer Neil Diamond was.
Oh my
You know,
god!
and you know, again, I'm a believer, and all these '70s hits that weren't done by him, but were written by him, or Carly Simon, or you know, Carole King.
Carole
These
King.
Hero King
Yeah.
is
Or
like,
the other fun factoid about Neil Diamond is that I think a lot of people don't know is that the stage name he wanted was Ice Cherry.
Yeah. We'll be thankful to the fates and the Norns that
Yeah,
one
yeah.
didn't.
that's a good name for a nice.
He
But
had
And his manager.
But to get back,
old
to
Neil
get-
had a little bit of an ego.
Yeah.
fair enough.
Well, you know, if you think
So
about it,
to get back around to where we're going. So we wind up understanding that this whole cadre of people back then were responsible for things like, I mean, again, the Eagles, one of the greatest selling bands of all time. Linda Ronstadt's backing band when she appeared on the Midnight Special, you know?
And as you're talking about the Eagles and how they formed, did you know that Joe actually lent Jimmy his first Les Paul and convinced Jimmy that that's what he needed to be wearing around his neck?
Yes, I do. And do you know, to go even deeper into minutia, that when Joe got offered to join the Eagles from the James Gang, he got a hold of Neil Young, and Neil Young just on the phone said, well, "Why the hell do you want to join those assholes?" But all these intersection nexus points that we don't get to see, this documentary is going into, because it's focusing on that generation, that cohort's people that made our popular music happen. People like Waddy Watchell, And I just encourage everybody to
Wait,
watch
what was the
it.
name of the? What
I'm
was the
looking
name of it?
forward to it because,
The name of the documentary is called Immediate
Oh, the
Family.
immediate family.
and the reason
Okay.
that I'm looking forward to it is because I have a feeling that this is going to be very, very complimentary to the documentary about the canyon.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. The reason why I'm interested in it is because Waddy Watchell is a really significant guitar player to me, and we'll reference him at the end of the show. Because what I want to talk about is, in light of our modern era where we are all trying to be more aware, and we
Yeah.
we have not only the benefit of hindsight, but we have the benefit of technology. Like, we were just nerding out so deeply about all these little facts, and some of which we just literally discovered through the help of the
Yeah.
internet, and constantly being able to look things up all the time. My question is this: I have been in my nostalgic mid 50s. I have been going back through a lot of periods in my life where music or art was really significant in kind of shaping me. And I've been realizing that there are really significant touchstones in my life that I'm now kind of uncomfortable with,
Ah.
because to use a very modern way of saying it, it didn't age well.
Oh yeah.
And part of
Yeah.
this actually came from our discussion in the Jimmy Buffett episode. There are a number of Jimmy Buffett songs, and I think nobody's going to
I know which
argue
one we want
that
to
Jimmy
talk about
Buffett.
first.
I don't think anybody's going to argue that Jimmy Buffett was a genuine guy, and he wanted people to be happy, and he wanted his music to motivate people to
Oh, yeah.
happiness. But there are a few ways and things said back then that are not something that any of us would pony up for in 2023.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it brings me to this point to ask you guys this: who's got something that they love that they're struggling with by way of its, I don't know, what are we going to say, acceptability in this? What hasn't aged well for you guys that you still really love? And I guess we'll go, Chris, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, and
Because
I can jump in on this.
it isn't music exclusive. It can be art. It can be art of any kind.
Yeah, and I've been really running this through my brain box since we first talked about this idea in pre-production. And Andy, you and I
Pre-production,
talked
you
about
make it sound like we're so organized.
Pre.
yeah, casual conversation on
Right.
Zoom.
Yeah.
But and I threw out an idea to you that I was thinking about, and I decided to steer clear of that, because there's a much bigger one, and it is in music. And you mentioned the Beach Boys earlier, and I don't think there's a lot of debate that the real genius within the Beach Boys, what made the Beach Boys so amazing and unique, was Brian Wilson.
I was
And
just gonna say, Mike Love.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
right?
That's where I was going.
Hey man, tambourine drives a lot of music.
But there was
And
another
there was
component
Danny
of
back
that.
there.
Yeah.
There was another component of that made Brian Wilson so special and magical and amazing. And this takes us to the thing that didn't age well for me, that touches a whole array of music that I absolutely love and am passionate about, but there's always that asterisk, and that's Phil Spector.
Oh dear.
Because
Oh.
Murder doesn't age well.
Well played, Chris.
No matter how you slice it, Murder
That
doesn't
just
age
went
well.
south, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, murder doesn't age well. Violence towards people in general. That hair that he
the
showed
hair
up with,
that he wore
that was-
into the courtroom, that alone was bad
amazing.
enough. Yeah, but
Hi, not to make you feel bad about the hair comment or anything, but
but
That's what got him
that-
convicted.
that he-
maybe.
that he made so much. He was responsible for
The
so much
wall of sound.
amazing music. The wall of sound. I mean, the whole Beach Boys thing. Let It Be. You know, he was everywhere, and he touched everything.
So what
And
does that do? What I'm interested in is what does that do to your ability to appreciate those creations that he made?
it adds
Yeah,
a
it ain't
link.
easy.
Yeah, it adds it almost adds a layer of film over it. It doesn't completely ruin it for me, but it you know, like I said before, there's always this asterisk of, wow, that's really really fucking brilliant. And especially, you know, I just recently got new headphones, so I'm like really
You're actually
discovering
hearing
music
stuff
again
now.
in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. Oh, I'm hearing stuff that I have never heard before. And so I listened to something that Phil produced, and it's like, oh my God, just the mad genius
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
But then there's that asterisk, and then
Capital
it's like,
mad.
and it's like, yeah, but Phil Spector, and
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
good. So
But if you knew anything
it's
about
like
Phil
that.
Spector, you knew this was coming. He brought a gun into the studio back in the Motown days. He
Yeah.
put it on the desk, and he would
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
let people know this was his show, and he was not
Yeah.
afraid to
And
shoot
he
you.
was the
Yeah.
boss.
Yeah. Ronnie Spector was actually so incredibly bold to pull the wool off of pull the curtain off of Phil Spector, even back in the day. And she was dismissed for it over and over
didn't know
and
that.
over again. There were people in that entire world who knew exactly who and what Phil Spector was, but he kept on cranking out the hits. And the
Well, he
number
made a
one,
lot of people a lot of money. You don't fuck with that.
exactly.
You don't shit where you eat.
And there are people who I really respect music wise who kind of looked the other way. And in that regard, it was for me, one of them was the Ramones.
Oh.
You know, they got a hold of Phil Spector and said, we want the wall of sound. And Spector at the time was he started to slide into a bit of obscurity, but that's just it. You listen to the Ramones.
It was the one album, right? Mondo,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah. And you listen to Rock and Roll Radio, the song Rock and Roll Radio. And it is a perfect mashup of the homage of that era of radio, the lyrics referencing that era of radio, us Gen X kids listening to Bakelite overheating transistor radios and listening. I mean, it was perfect. But again, like you said, Chris, asterisk, and it's tough. Tell you what, we're going to jump out to a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to have another very uncomfortable series of art discussions when we come back. Narrowband Broadcast Network, 4 guys sitting around bullshitting. You know the drill. Bye.
So you know what's really interesting is I just watched last night. I watched the Milli Vanilli documentary.
Oh, okay.
And you know, those guys were done
very
so
I kind of
dirty.
feel bad for them.
Yeah, they
now.
really
Those
were.
done so dirty.
Yeah.
I mean, and what I would say about that is very simply, take 2 major pop acts, both massively popular in the 80s, Milli Vanilli, Michael Jackson. Milli Vanilli didn't touch any little boys. All they did was
Right.
lip sync.
And look,
Well,
Yeah.
the
fabulous.
problem comes up, and this, yeah, with the documentary puts this up, and it's very true. It wasn't until the Grammy nomination and the Grammy Award
Mm-hmm.
that
is-
shit
yeah.
went south, and the
Yeah.
industry had to turn its back at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Otherwise, they would lose all legitimacy. And I mean, the Grammys up until that time had been suffering a crisis of legitimacy,
There was a
anyways.
thing that I don't.
So-
You guys weren't really old enough to remember this, but this is, the late '70s were really bad in like a ton of ways, and hedging into the '80s, because what had happened was the music that came out in the '60s primarily. So you look at the early Dead, and you look at all their side bands, and you look at anybody in that era, Jefferson Airplane, all those guys, right? And the Beatles and the Stones too. They were musical acts that were discovered by the labels and then became big. And by the time you get into the
Yeah.
late '70s, the labels had started to go out. This is especially true with disco. I think they're doing this with rap now too. But the studios were going out and just like creating the stars, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, I stopped listening mostly because of ABBA, although I'm coming around on them. But I know it's inevitable.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
well, let me just finish up. So, but I actually quit. I
Yeah,
think
go
I've
ahead.
told you this story before, that I actually sort of about 1977, 8, I literally stopped listening to popular music and I went hardcore classical for like 4 or 5 years, and then I got dragged to see this little concert in Toronto in the early '80s, and it was this
Yep.
little group called Talking Heads, which I'd never heard of before, and it was the Stop Making Sense tour, and it was like literally a life-altering event because it sounded
Yeah,
authentic.
yeah.
And I was always really sympathetic to like the punk movement for these same reasons, right? Is
3 chords in the truth, baby.
they were back to
Right.
like, this is authentic stuff. And
Now,
here we go.
Mark, was Laurie
Oh, yeah,
Anderson like
baby.
the opening act on that
I've been a mad
Yeah.
fan.
on that
yeah.
tour? Oh, yeah, she's her. I mean, I wouldn't
She's my surrealist crush.
view her as conventional
Nice.
music.
Good
She is,
choice,
man.
by the way.
She's a performance
yeah.
artist, and she's brilliant. She is
There was
absolutely
there was a
fucking
lot.
brilliant.
There was an artist in Canada who's still around who was a lot like her, named Jane Siberry, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Oh, I love
yeah,
Jane
we used to go
Siberry.
see her.
Yeah.
I did. Bruce Cockburn just came through town actually last week here, and I
Oh,
did he
couldn't
really?
believe I
God
missed him. I
damn.
didn't know. Yeah, he's walking on canes now too, and he's got arthritis, so he's kind
Oh.
of scaling back. But
Oh.
Siberry,
That's like when I recently saw like one of the most recent live videos of oh shit, why am I blanking on it? Tiny Island. Come on, Mark, help me out.
Montserrat.
No. The song Tiny Island. It's one of Leo
Oh,
Kottke.
yeah,
Leo
yeah, man.
Kottke. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw a video of the Montserrat was a good answer, I'll
Montserrat.
give you.
I
That
have
is
all
a
of his
good
records.
answer.
I'm sorry, I
Nauru,
didn't
right?
get that one.
Of all the
Yeah.
Vanuatu.
Vanuatu, you're right. Watching somebody, because I've been following Leo for fucking since I
Oh,
was like
yeah,
4, and I mean, when I think of Leo, I think of either the video, the film of him for the Old Gray Whistle Test, or Midnight Special, when he was on
Oh,
Midnight
yeah.
Special. Young, shaggy brown hair and everything. Now you watch him, he still, by the way, brother still
Yeah.
plays,
Yeah.
but it's all tuned down and slowed down by about 20 beats
Brush
per
with
second.
Greatness, I don't
per
know if you
minute.
knew. Did you know this,
So-
Andy, that we had him on campus in our little theater?
I remember you telling me that it was like a year or two before I was there, which was
No,
the greatest
it was
insult
after
that
you
could
were
ever
here. It was
be.
after. Yeah.
What year?
Probably in the 2000s.
Oh, that's even
It
more
should be,
upsetting,
too.
because I would have
Yeah,
flown
because it
back.
was like there were like 60 people in the audience, and we only got him because the woman who was Vincent Di Lorenzo's manager, from Violent Femmes, Linda.
Oh yeah,
Linda,
I know.
Linda
Yeah.
said, "Hey, I know Leo Kottke. He's coming to town. Would you guys be interested in having him on campus?" And it was like, how much? And it was only like
Duh.
a couple of thousand because he was on his way someplace else and it was just an extra night for him.
Yeah. He was literally driving
So
past.
me and like 60 of my best friends sat around in this little tiny venue and he
Nice.
destroyed us. Sorry to go off on that.
Oh,
So, but
wow.
anyway, yeah. But so
That's
the things
okay.
we find out. Go on.
But
Go on.
I just wanted to say real quick, I have recently heard the best tour, the best tour name ever, and that is from John Cleese, who is
He
coming to
just came through
downtown
here
in
last
this
week
next year,
sometime.
and his tour is called "See Me Before I Die."
Right? Well, I tell you what, we're obviously back from break, and I'm totally fine with that because this all does lead me around again to this is an eternal question. This, can you separate the art and the artist? Are they the same thing, or are they completely individual and monolithic things? And I used to be very ardently in the camp of that the art and the artist are individual and independent from each other, because I really do have a feeling that in order to have art, you need to have somebody there to experience the art. Otherwise, it is not art. It is a personal exercise and expression of your id, which is okay and is important in its own right. But the act of art is upon the experiencer. But that doesn't make this discussion any easier. And I found myself looking back in my history and going, you know, I was so sure of that view that I just expressed. But now I'm not so sure anymore.
Shall I jump on
Yeah,
this?
I kind of.
Please do, professional thinker.
I still have in memory every Bill Cosby comedy album, from Noah up through to Russell, my brother with whom I slept.
And Noah's just hilarious.
And it's like
what a wonderful.
It's still is.
And it's like,
yeah, sticking a screwdriver into your muffler in order to make your car sound cool. And see, we're laughing, and we're all immediately back to that age and remembering that experience of hearing that for the first time.
So many brilliant things.
I mean, we mentioned Michael Jackson, and whatever, we don't know for sure about what Michael did, although we can suspect. But it's like, we know what we're pretty sure about what Cosby did.
We're pretty sure about the cause.
It's like, why did you have to do that, Mr. Huxtable? Why did Doctor? What what were you fucking thinking?
What exactly
that nearly was a spit take to camera. That was nearly a spit take to camera, Mark. I was drinking when you brought up Huxtable.
I'm just saying, and it's like, that's...
Yeah, couldn't you stop at the ugly sweaters? I mean,
it was the times. It was the times.
So, right. Yeah. Oh, and that's, by the way, one of the things, and this is a little bit old, but it is great. I will highly recommend that you guys watch Mark Maron's latest special. It's his first special for HBO. And one of the running gags in it, I'll save it, but one of the running gags in it was a different time. And that's kind of interesting, though, that I bring that up, because that's something that we often use, right? Either to self-soothe because of this weird angst that we feel about things that haven't aged well, or that we kind of go, well, does this help? Does this make it better? And I don't necessarily know if it does.
I don't want to get off Cosby too quickly, because
I do.
Well, here, no, there's at least one other point here that I mean, that I actually haven't really articulated out loud to anybody ever, and this is the thing that really at the heart of things bothers me about Bill Cosby, is that it's the pure hypocrisy. Because and when I say that, when I call that out, what I'm talking about is how in the early 90s, he took Lisa Bonet's career by the throat and got up on his high moral horse, because she made the film Angel Heart,
which was awesome, by the way.
And he didn't want her to do it, which
fucking
is a
fantastic movie.
It's a goddamn masterpiece.
That should have made her career.
It
Yeah.
should have, and instead he turned it into poison to
That's
her
interesting,
career,
isn't it?
and ran her off of the Cosby Show, sort of tossed her a different
Yeah.
world as kind of
Parting
Yeah,
a
gift.
blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
consolation prize. And good for her. Good for Lisa Bonet for saying, "You know what? Fuck you. I'm going to go do my career
Yeah.
anyway. I'm going to go be the I am my own person. You do not own me. You do not define me." But the fact that he leveraged his power and his influence to throw up such a massive roadblock. Oh, and then it turns around that he's, doing all this other shit on the down low at the
Oh,
same time.
I
That
think
that
I think
just
it's
makes me burn.
I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because I think that that's a really interesting angle. This idea of the hypocrisy. We've got we've got Huxtable in his button-up sweater being the skeeziest of skeezy people, and that's so anathema to the character that he played.
And
When it comes around to Ty, let's switch over to you. Who is your complicating factor? Who
You know,
is the art or artist that just makes you kind of go, yeah, but I love the stuff?
it's interesting that you bring up this topic, and I hadn't been reading the threads lately because I've been very busy at work. But I've been working with, um, kill. You see a Buddha on the side of the road, you kill the Buddha,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
I've been working along those lines with your heroes. Kill your
yeah.
heroes, right? They
Interesting.
say you never want to meet your heroes,
Yep.
right? I'll come back to that in a minute. Uh, um, some girls, the Rolling Stones,
Oh,
Yeah.
right? And on Tattoo You, there is a song that just, man, the lyrics are not necessarily they go right along with the song, but the song is really good. And that is Little TNA.
Right.
Totally wrong, but the song is
Mhm.
so yummy,
Well, and it's
right?
it's really interesting to me that you bring up the Stones because, of
brown
course,
sugar, anyone?
very
Brown.
famously, right? That's exactly where I was going. They have, as of what was it, like 2 years ago, they
Mhm.
finally retired brown sugar, going, you know what? We're old, but even we aren't okay with this
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
Right. The band,
I'm afraid
the
so.
song from the
Yeah,
band. What a great song. What a great piece of Americana.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, it's a struggle to really grasp what Robertson and those guys were trying to do.
Well, and now
And it
since
comes,
we've lost Robbie,
yeah,
I mean, and there you can go on the YouTubes and you can hear Robbie Robertson describing a number of different angles on the night they drove old Dixie
yeah.
down.
yeah, yeah.
And what's interesting to me is if you go down that rabbit hole, I think you will probably find the same thing that I did, and that is, and look, Robbie Robertson was one of the most earnest people, but I hear in his descriptions of the motivations for that song, I hear him struggling
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the motivations
Yeah.
that brought up
Full
that song.
disclosure,
But
yeah,
the other
Because
side,
he was so totally conflicted. He was Canadian. He was a First
yeah, he
Nation
was.
American
Yeah,
American Indian, and yet at the same time he was down in the South or up north, and he was always struggling and searching for who he
yeah,
was.
Oh, the man spent 2/3 of his life just coming to terms with the fact that and getting comfortable enough with being First Nations to actually lean
yeah.
into it and
Yeah,
make that part of his, because he had gotten some really bad advice when he was much, or maybe good advice. I don't know.
yeah. It
His
depends on
career
your
is what
angle,
it
but
was.
I agree with you. You're right that it was like
To run from it
it was
and
smart. It was smart career advice for the
It
time.
would be kind of it
yeah.
would be useful, strangely enough, I got to hear Joan Baez on the Rolling Thunder tour in 1976 in Mobile, Alabama, sing The Night They Drove.
You lucky
It
bastard.
was one of the really
Yeah.
great concerts of my life. But she sang The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. And it's really interesting to listen to that with a room full of Southerners who not knee-jerk redneck Southerners, but thoughtful ones who recognize the trauma that's present there. And I just wanted the contrast would be Sweet Home Alabama. Because I'm just going to say in Birmingham, they love the governor. And that's, explaining George Wallace. I can make this even more complicated for you Yankee kids. African Americans voted for George Wallace. And but this is the messed up reason. This is we have to learn to live with these paradoxes. A lot of older, not younger ones, but a lot of older African Americans voted for George Wallace because George Wallace was the first white Southern governor to take separate but equal seriously. So he put bathrooms in black schoolhouses in Alabama. And that was
which was a new
they
thing.
Got books,
which at that time was progress.
Crazy.
Well,
and it was like I didn't even believe this stuff because I grew up north, right? But it was like when I remember Jesse Jackson coming down sometime in the late 70s when Governor George was sort of on his way out. His health was terrible and all. They went to see him, and it's like I'm thinking is like. I remember the young Jesse Jackson because I was living in Chicago when Mayor Lindsay sent him to Mayor Daley, and Richard J. Daley just threw him out of the office and said, "Get the fuck out of here, kid." And Jesse reorganized and stopped a lot of the gang violence in South Chicago. So that's the Jesse I knew. And then here he's going to visit George fucking Wallace, and it's like, so this is like and so Leonard Skinner. I'm sorry, boys. I love that song. I get when I drive home. Sweet Home Alabama, it is. I can, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
Hold on, Ty. Was that your uncomfortable art, Mark? Is that what you're calling for?
Weird that there's a kind of uncomfortableness that's probably good here.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Agree.
And I was just going to come.
Like I was never a big fan. Anyway, just going to say.
Fair enough, Ty.
I was just going to say, it does come down to, and that's one of the pieces that I enjoy merely for the fact that it really makes me think.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and isn't that the MO of artists that it's supposed to challenge you?
Another one. Yeah, absolutely. Another one is Fear. There are some songs in that canon that do not stand up today.
Right.
For anybody that knows who Fear is. But nevertheless, that is something that I will listen to periodically because it makes me think and it makes me wonder what angle, because there's always several angles to write from, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what were they trying to say? What were they doing? And we talk about, things that were socially acceptable 10 years ago aren't socially acceptable now. And that's really what we're talking about is viewing that old socially acceptable thing in the lens of today.
Yeah,
and at the same time, and at the same time not
struggle.
and at the same time not retconning it. That's something that really bothers me is taking art out of its time and finding a way to make it okay today.
Yeah.
That kind of, and I use the term retcon. That's sort of what it feels like to me.
And what it really comes down to is when these people are famous, first of all, right? When you get to that stratosphere of fame, shit's different.
Yeah.
Shit is just different beyond our fathom. Shit is different, right? If you don't think that the Beatles, I can tell you some stories that I learned recently about the Beatles that are just like, oh my God,
I know
really?
stuff about Donovan.
If we would have known that at the time.
Well, and I mean, even
and some of it has to do with Donovan. So,
right. And even, I mean, the Beatles are a good example in that they had a hit with Getting Better All the Time, which has in it one of the most infamous lines in pop music. I used to be cruel to my woman and beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. How can you? Oh, but I'm better now. Now, yeah.
Oh, but wait.
Then I was mean, but now I'm changing my scene and I'm doing the best that I can.
How awesome!
and it gets even better. Norwegian Wood. We all have this warm, fuzzy feeling.
Right?
When you look at those lyrics,
Yeah.
that's about
I've been doing
arson.
this. I've been doing this
Yep.
a lot lately because we've been picking out new material, and so I've been sort of fishing back through time, and looking at some of the great old songs of my youth, and a lot of them are just not acceptable anymore.
No.
In the
And
summertime,
for God's sakes, don't do nursery rhymes, because they are
Oh,
some of
God.
the most inappropriate
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Well, Dr. Mark, I really appreciate that
What's
you
wrong
brought
with
up
Baby Shark?
everything. Uh, Dr. Mark, I love that you brought up Leonard Skinner, because I was literally just chatting with a friend last night about we do this thing every once in a while where we get together and we swap music because we come from very
Yeah,
different
cool.
backgrounds, and we're sort of trying to enrich each other's experiences, um, and share with each other stuff that we like. And I got on this kind of 70s kick, and I actually shared "You Got That Right," and
Mm.
it's funny
Great
because
song.
I framed it in and said, I'm normally not really comfortable with Southern rock in general,
Yeah.
because for a great many reasons. And then I sort of did a, racists, um, but it's more complex and more nuanced than that. And the thing is that Ronnie Van Zant was such a brilliant
Have to
songwriter.
say.
I mean, there's just no way around it. Uh,
He's
you
a
know,
fantastic lyricist. I
and
mean,
there
he
and
really
there
was.
and the Allman Brothers. I can't get around the fact that the Allman Brothers are brilliant. I mean, just
Oh, Little Feat.
really
I've been
amazing.
revisiting Little Feat.
Oh,
And Little Feet. I was just headed right. I was making a beeline to Little Feet. Thank you, because I was just watching Little Feet video not too long ago, and I was like tugging at my collar. It was making me really uncomfortable.
come on,
And
man.
here's
I played Dixie Chicken at my wedding.
oh,
Well,
I
that was
love Dixie
appropriate for
Chicken.
your wedding,
No,
Andrew.
Thank you very much.
this was like the video for Texas Twister.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, that just would not play today. And then that leads us into ZZ Top, the
Sharp Dressed Man.
rampant
Is that where we're
sexism and
going with that? Yeah.
objectification.
Oh
I
no,
mean,
tush.
I mean,
yeah,
all of
tush.
it.
I mean, it's baked into the name.
Yeah.
And it's like and I think that gets to the heart of the question that you
LaGrange.
raised today, Andy, which is how do you square really good art with really uncomfortable attitudes, ideas, people?
Well, that's the MO of the show.
First of
And
all, this is a point of practice, right? Because what we do here, how we parse these things out and make things accessible or acceptable to us to listen to it, because it's something that drives our ears nuts or flips our lid, but we know in the background, we know that this is not acceptable. This
Mhm.
translates into a lot of other places in our life, right?
I
Where we
agree.
have those paradoxes and we need to pull them apart and find that pocket where it's acceptable. And it makes
Mhm.
us stop and think. The thing that Andy, the guys that I watched the other day was Blazing Saddles.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
It did not hold up.
And it
Mm.
does
Did you
hold
think?
up. It
Yeah.
does hold
Oh,
up
yeah.
today, because what it does is it pulls out every racial trope that you can
Yeah.
think of, and it lets you look at it in the daylight.
And
Yeah.
he's skewering it. He is skewering it. I mean, I think that's Mel Brooks is tearing it apart. He is not trading on it to
No, he didn't soft
sell his
pedal it
story.
at
Just like
all.
And it's great. The Yiddish, the Native
that's where I
Americans
was. That's where I
speaking
was.
Yiddish.
That's where
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah,
I didn't
Yeah.
get that.
absolutely.
I did not get that for the longest time.
Schmatzes. Yeah.
I didn't
That was
understand
hilarious.
where that was coming from.
Right.
For the longest time.
interesting. And that's interesting because in my mind, that's the other side of the coin. There are certain things in our generations, both our generations, that and Mark, I'll throw Tom Lehrer in here in
Oh,
this
yeah,
regard
yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
where we didn't realize just how significant and cagey and on the nose that stuff was. But now, in light of our late and middle ages, going, oh shit, not only did that age well, that aged like a fine wine.
Oh, I get it now.
There, right?
Yeah.
I get it now. There's so much there. Tell you what, we're going to take our last break here. We're going to come back and wrap this very convoluted discussion up. But this is the Narrowband Broadcast Network. I'm Andrew. That's Dr. Mark. That's Chris. That's Ty. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Bye.
So what I was going to say, guys, was
go ahead.
Was where it comes for me is I can separate the art from the artist to the extent of what do I know that artist has done, and is it monetarily supportive of that artist? Because do I really want to support that behavior?
That's a different question.
So you're coming at it more, I think that is a different question, but it's tangential. And does that mean, Ty, in your mind, that it is okay to appreciate and commercially support things for an artist who's dead? If there's because, where I go with that is people like H.P. Lovecraft or Theodore Geisel or Roald Dahl.
Right.
Okay. As writers, all those people to our generations did some really significant things. And all of those people, quite frankly, had some really terrible shit going on.
They were all fucked up.
They were messed up to one degree or another.
Absolutely.
I mean, H.P. Lovecraft was terribly racist. Roald Dahl was casually racist, but out loud. And Geisel, of course, was very surreptitiously racist. But are we going to argue with the art? Are we going to forswear the cat?
Have you guys been watching the Wes Anderson versions, by the way, of all those stories that Dahl wrote?
No, I've not kept up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take an advisement.
I'll have to check that out. Ty, responding, you both have sort of talked about where your lines are in terms of separating the art from the artist, and coming in as a practicing visual artist all my life, I have held the opposite view from you, Andy, which is the art is an extension of the artist. The art, they are inseparable. They are invariably intertwined because the art came forth from the artist. And do I engage with that? Yeah, okay, even if it's uncomfortable. And I also come from a place that art's role is to make us uncomfortable.
But you're coming from a place
at its best.
You're taking the artist as a total. It did come from the artist. It came from a part of the artist, not the total.
Yeah. And
right?
where I come at you, Chris, I'm going to throw this at you, and we'll talk about this at some point in the future. But I'm going to be both semantic and very semiotic here, in that you are conflating the physical or the resultant of the act of creation with art. I say art is different. Art is the experience. It is the nexus point. It is the crossing of the creator's mind and expression and the person that is experiencing. Art
I don't
for
disagree.
me, art for me is that experience, that moment in time.
Well,
It is
it's
not
essentially
the
that
painting.
connection, that conversation, and you're right. And as I've gotten older, I've come around to much more of that view that that art is about that dialogue, right? It's about that interchange between consciousnesses.
Here, this is going to make sense to a few people, and this is how I sum it up. Art is not phenomena. Art is noumena.
Phenomena.
Yeah.
But no. So,
No, no, no.
speaking of, Dr. Mark, what's your thing that you are uncomfortable about when it comes to people, art that you have looked at in the past? Although you're going to have to swing for the fences to beat Cosby, because
Oh, I
I think
got
that is
well.
really
So
one of the greatest
we
examples.
have there's a lot of dirty secrets floating around in philosophy, and of course the big one is that Heidegger was a Nazi,
Right?
and it's like the
That's a secret.
not
I
anymore,
mean,
Well,
is
and
it?
but it was,
right.
and
No,
and
you heard it here
yeah,
third.
and that he was a
Yeah,
Nazi, and it
right.
was like on the other hand. So here's, I mean, these are the questions we're facing these days. With there is a bit of cancel culture out there where it's like we don't want to use the art, the thinking of people who were just like horrors, right? Um, there
Yeah.
was when I was in graduate school, this came out that they had discovered all of this data from Mengele's experiments in the camps on hypothermia. And what he was doing, of
Yeah.
course, was
Mm.
hooking kids up to thermometers and putting them in an ice bath and watching them die, right? And so, like, the worst kind of horrific Nazi things you can imagine. But the question was, can we use the data? And the thing is, like, these are I mean, I hope these are completely irreproducible experiments. We can never commit these kind of horrors again in a civil society.
We do use
But
that data,
can we
though.
And
We
not
use
only that data has saved
a lot?
lives.
And it's like, but see, this was but it's a serious question. It's sort of where we're here now. It's like, if these people are just horrible, can we use the data? Now, maybe that's not quite the same as the question we're asking here.
But I think
No,
it's
no,
really
I think,
interesting and illuminating that you pointed out,
yeah.
because you're right, it's not just about art. There are so many places in
Yeah.
our human experience where something terrible has happened, but you kind of got to go, but is it really?
Can we use it?
Seriously, are we going to have to throw the baby
Right.
out
So
here with this?
yeah, everybody's broken. Some people are just wrecked irrevocably,
All true.
right? But a clock is right at least once, twice a day,
Depending
even if it's
upon-
broken,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there can always be something good that
Can I
comes
watch
from
Woody Allen
something
movies? Is
bad.
that okay?
And
Right?
and I'll say, Ty, I'll say 3 times a day when daylight savings time shifts.
That's true. And yeah. Well,
That's not
as
going to
we
save
wrap this up,
Heidegger.
no, it's true. I'm gonna cop to mine. And what's really interesting is, as this discussion has unfolded, kind of like a gnarled ball of yarn, which is our way, is almost like every single one of you guys has put something in front of me that ties to my complicated relationship with one of my all-time favorite musical artists, who is Warren Zevon. And it's very interesting because, Chris, you brought up this this phenomena of the hypocrisy versus the public persona of an artist. Okay, you know, for me, Warren Zevon is one of the most significant musicians in my life. I go back to listening to my first song of Warren Zevon's was not Werewolves of London. My first song from Warren Zevon was Lawyers, Guns, and Money. And it was the first time I ever heard somebody swearing on the radio.
Because the shit has hit the fan.
The shit has hit the fan. But this all ties together because we were talking about the documentary Immediate Family about the whole cadre of people down in the LA scene, the music scene, Jackson Browne and Waddy Wachtel. Well, Jackson Browne was responsible for bringing Warren Zevon really out into the public. Jackson Browne was the producer of Warren's big debut album, Excitable Boy, which had, by the way, it had Linda Ronstadt singing background vocals. Mm-hmm. It had both Lindsey Buckingham and the Fleetwood Mac camp was very deeply enmeshed into that whole scene at the time. Waddy Wachtel, who's featured in Immediate Family, very famously was not only Warren Zevon's guitar player, but Warren's longtime semi-back and forth wife started out being Waddy Wachtel's girlfriend until Warren was in the van with her and essentially stole her away. And
it's a stratospheric thing. Those things mean less at that stratosphere than they do to us in this stratosphere.
And looking back on Warren and the significance of his music to my life, he's a fascinating character study. His family background was horrific. He was a very conflicted person all his life. Fame often escaped him, and he grew very resentful of that later on in his life. But much in the same way that some of his influences were people that we also canonize. He was very close friends and took great inspiration from another very complicating personality, and that's Hunter S. Thompson. Again, we all lionize. Wreck of complications. We all lionize Hunter S. Thompson, but boy, seriously, you just take an hour out of that dude's life, and the amount of inappropriate shit that you can't justify. But
I'd go beyond inappropriate and say downright fucking appalling.
Well, I would say absolutely criminal in any court of the world.
Debaucherous.
And that's really where I come back to. That's where I come back to Warren, and that is, if you listen to really his last album, and I'm not going to go deeply into it, but of course, Warren died of mesothelioma.
That last album is just a heartbreaker. Oh my God!
And I will tell you this. So that album came out now, 14 years ago?
Yeah.
And at the same time, VH1 did a documentary of the making of that album.
Coming up next on VH1, a special commercial-free presentation of Inside Out, Warren Zevon.
Reckless, gifted, provocative, irreverent, intelligent, courageous. It's a crazy bag of labels, but over the years, the man at the center of this tale has comfortably worn them all. But in August 2002, singer-songwriter Warren Zevon was tagged with another label, terminally ill. Given just 3 months to live, he set out to make the record of a lifetime.
I am one of the biggest Warren Zevon fans on earth. I have not, to this day, been able to bring myself to watch it, because one of the things that happens in that, and this was a very spontaneous thing, when they all gathered together, and the people on that album that came together for Warren at that time, people like Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, who was a longtime famous collaborator, and they had a mutual admiration society, Warren and Bruce. There's so many big time people that showed up for that album. And they were all
Actually,
gathered
David
together.
Letterman.
They were all just, yeah, I'll get to Letterman because that's
Letterman
very
carried
famous.
A lot
because
of water for him.
Letterman was one of the places where Warren could go when things got really bad, and Letterman would put him back up there to let him earn some money.
Wow.
It was that thing. And the Mitch album song, Hit Somebody, was a contest where somebody told Warren that, nobody, there are all these famous songs from sports. Nobody writes a hockey song. Well, Mitch Albom, the guy who wrote the book Tuesdays with Maury, was just like, well, I'll write the lyrics. And Warren is like, that's going to be a terrible song. And they recorded it, and it's fucking brilliant. But what happened was, when they were recording that album, Warren was given, he had literally just gotten the diagnosis about 3 months earlier. He was planning on doing an album. Suddenly it becomes his last album, and he knows that the clock is running. And a couple really significant things happened. One of them, very famously, when Warren's last appearance on David Letterman's show. And Dave often had Warren come in and fill in for Paul Schaefer when Paul was gone. But David devoted an entire episode to Warren. Very famously, Warren came out and said,
well, first of all, let me say that I might have made a tactical error in not going to a physician for 20 years.
I see. All right.
It was one of those phobias that really didn't pay off.
And the other thing, when Dave asked him, and I mean, you could see Letterman suffering through this interview, said, what do you think you're gonna miss? And he's like, well, I hope I make it long enough to see the next Bond movie. And he said,
from your perspective now, do you know something about life and death that maybe I don't know now?
Not unless I know how much you're supposed to enjoy every sandwich.
Enjoy every sandwich.
Yeah.
That's, and really the thing that was hardest is when you hear that album, and I encourage everybody to put it on Spotify and stream it. They do a version of Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door. And it was spontaneous at the last minute. They were like, let's figure out one more song. And it was Knocking on Heaven's Door. And you hear the labored breaths of Warren singing that. And at the end, and it's such a beautiful gut punch. You hear Warren, as all these famous people are singing along, Knocking on Heaven's Door. You just hear Warren singing, open up, open up, open up the doors for me, open up the doors for me. And it is just like, I couldn't. And at that moment, I knew I'm never going to be able to watch this documentary. I'm never going to be able to bring myself to do it. But Warren, for as incredible an intellect as he was, as incredible a musician as he was,
I guess everybody who knows you knows that you did enjoy yourself to the point of punishing others, really, at some point. And
well, that's not really the way you put it outside of meetings, but if you want to say so, that's okay.
Emotionally speaking.
Well, yeah, I know how you meant it.
He was a horrible person. He was terrible. And the songs that I love so much from him are terrible songs about terrible people doing terrible things.
Excitable Boy, right?
Excitable Boy, or one of my favorite, which was actually my very first, and I still have it, my very first Gmail account is Mr. Bad Example. Which starts off, I started as an altar boy working at the church, learning all my holy moves, doing some research, which led me to a cash box labeled children's funds. I left the change and took the bills and stuffed them inside my cummerbund. And it really is just every single terrible thing, but Warren made you love singing about it. Yeah, and you're right, Ty, excitable boy. You know, let's make a wonderful, catchy song about absolute sociopathology and murdering somebody and then raping her.
Yeah.
So, but
You
it
know
all
what?
really, yeah.
As we're all talking, and as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering how Led Zeppelin has managed to miss this boat, because
They haven't, but it was a different time.
well, even the songs, right? Some of the songs are very misogynistic.
But a
Right?
lot of interestingly, a lot of the very misogynistic songs from them were old blues standards. They're not even their songs.
Yeah.
But I just think as we wrap up here, I encourage everybody to maybe cast a different eye on some of these things that we feel as being. I mean, do we really have to not enjoy Harry Potter anymore? Do we really, can we not separate, can we not separate the creator from the creation? Or is there a separation? I think that's my question. I'm still struggling with whether or not this is an issue, a la Chris and I having, I won't say diametrically opposed, but I will say there's a dynamic tension between your idea of art and mine.
Well, I think we've converged over the years.
Well, and I think what we've done is kind of where I'm going as the wrap up, and that is we've been doing this for centuries. I will bring out Mel Brooks here, you know, the great piece of, we have the first artist and then the first art critic pissing all over the wall. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been struggling with this question of, is there a difference? And you know what? It's 2023 headed into 2024, and I don't think we've made a goddamn bit of progress. Having said that, we're the Hats. This is how we go out with confusion and passion. And do us a favor, hit like, click subscribe. Obviously, go buy merch. We haven't sold merch in like over a year. Go buy a hat or something. It's in the name of the show, okay? Go buy a hat. But until next time, everybody, I'm Andy. That's Dr. Mark. That's Chris. That's Ty. We're the Hats. And as always, see you next time, because we may end up miles from here. Take care, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.
Well, there's another chunk of time you can't get back. From Portland, Oregon, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, this has been Keep Your Hat On, a big little show about a whole lot of nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is a Now Band Broadcast Network production in association with Andrew Scott Media. Andrew Scott, executive producer. Robert Anthony and Christopher Vacano, associate producers. Our theme music was written and produced by Andrew Scott, along with help from Ron Kajawa. Website design and maintenance by Vacano Creative, Christopher Vacano Webmaster. Available on the web at vacanocreative.com. Audio and video production by Andrew Scott Media. Available online at andrewscottmedia.com. Hey, if you got questions, comments, or topics for the show, why don't you email the boys at talkback@kyhopodcast.com. And don't forget to like, click, and subscribe. On behalf of the boys, I'm the announcer, apparently, Richard Cranium. Thanks for listening, I guess.
NBBN. The Narrowband Broadcast Network. The focus is on you.